As part of this sectional module, we'll actually go to the details about how to get started with DBT using DBT CLI. We'll go ahead and set up DBT CLI on Mac or Windows. Once it is set up, we'll actually see how to initiate the project using Postgres as adapter. There is a concept of adapters when it comes to DBT. For each and every database which is supported by DBT, there is adapter. Using adapters, you should be able to initiate the projects using appropriate commands. We'll go to the relevant commands to actually initiate the project using Postgres as adapter. We'll also go to the details about setting up Postgres database. Using that Postgres database, we'll make sure we configure the DBT project so that the DBT project can run against the newly created Postgres database. Once the DBT project is configured with relevant details with respect to Postgres database, we'll also go to the details about running the DBT project. Also, we will see how to validate whether it is successfully run or not. We'll go through all these details as part of this sectional module. Keep in mind, we'll be covering only DBT CLI in this sectional module. Once we are clear about DBT CLI, then we'll actually talk about DBT Cloud as part of next section or module. As part of this lecture, let's get an overview of official documentation of DBT provided by getdbt.com. GetDBT.com is official support providers for DBT. They offer freemium services, which means there will be few services which are free. For some advanced services, especially support, they charge. To go to the documentation, you can go to this menu as part of their official website, which is nothing but getdbt.com. You can click on it. You should be able to see all the menu items you have. You will understand most of these as we go along with the course. For now, to actually review the relevant documentation, you can go to docs homepage and then you can review here. We'll be using the documentation under DBT CLI to set up DBT CLI, but you have other documentations as well. You can actually click on learn more in getting started guide. It will talk about DBT Cloud, which is a freemium service provided by this platform. Also, there are some free courses around DBT on demand ones. You can click on it and you can review those and you can sign up if you are interested. That being said, as we want to set up DBT as part of our Windows or Mac, you can actually click on DBT CLI here and then you should be able to review the documentation in case if you are interested to review the documentation to set up. I'll explain most of the core concepts without going to the documentation here, but wherever it is relevant, I will actually direct you to the documentation to make sure you review those additional information and take it further. That being said, let's go ahead and set up DBT CLI as part of our Mac or Windows, and then we'll actually see how to use it for our projects. When it comes to setting up DBT CLI, there are multiple approaches. I'll be using pip-based approach. Pip is nothing but Python package management tool. To use pip, you need to have Python 3.6 or later. Once you have Python 3.6 or later, you should be able to set up DBT, then take it further. However, to review the program files associated with DBT or whatever files that are relevant from the perspective of DBT using better interfaces, I'll be using Visual Studio Code rather than just playing with command line interface. Visual Studio Code is one of the popular IDEs to take care of development in a better way. And hence the prerequisites are nothing but Python 3.6 or later so that we have pip to install DBT, then VS Code so that we can review the files that are related to DBT development. You can actually search whether you have appropriate version of Python as well as Visual Studio Code on your machine or not, then you should be able to take it further. In this case, you can go to the search bar here if you are using Windows. If you are using Mac, you should be able to go to Spotlight Search by clicking on this. Then you should be able to search for Visual Studio Code. In this case, I have Visual Studio Code as part of the recent. If you do not find in recent, you should be able to search for Visual Studio Code like this. If it is installed, you should be having Visual Studio Code like this. If it is saying browse, that means it is not available as part of your machine. It has to say app, which means Visual Studio Code is installed as app on this Windows-based machine. Same is the case with Mac. Once you use Spotlight Search to actually search for Visual Studio Code, either you'll be seeing as a local application or it might ask you to browse for Visual Studio Code to set up. Once you find Visual Studio Code, you should be able to click on it to open Visual Studio Code. To ensure whether you have appropriate version of Python or not, you can actually set up something called as a Python extension on this Visual Studio Code. It will facilitate you to actually work with Python seamlessly. To install Python extension, you can go to extensions here. Then you can search for Python. You have to choose this Python extension which is published by Microsoft. You can click on install. It will take care of installing Python extension for you. Once a Python extension is installed, you should be able to choose appropriate interpreters for your project and then take it further. You can scroll down and you can go to the details. There are quite a few additional features that comes along with this extension. Now we need to make sure we set up the project using Python and also Visual Studio Code. Once we set up the project, then we should be able to take it further to install DBT CLI. Once DBT CLI is set up, we should be able to use DBT CLI to get started with developing transformations using DBT. DBT is predominantly used for developing transformation logic that are relevant as part of your data engineering pipelines or data pipelines. You will understand all those nuances at a later point in time. For now, make sure you have Visual Studio Code and also you have Python extension so that you can leverage this to set up Workspace, to set up DBT CLI as part of Workspace to learn DBT in detail. When it comes to learning DBT using DBT CLI, the most compatible version of Python at this juncture is Python 3.8. However, even the later versions of Python 3.8 also might work. In this lecture, I'll demonstrate about how to set up Python 3.8 on Windows. You can follow similar instructions and set up Python 3.8 on Mac if you're using Mac. Most likely it should work. If you're stuck somewhere, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be there to support you. Now, we can actually click on the browser here. Once we are in the browser, we should be able to search for Python download. Let me go to google.com here. Then let me search for Python download, or we can also go to python.org directly. Even if you go to python.org, you should be able to see the download page directly on the homepage of Python itself. If you review the main download button here, it is nothing but download Python 3.10.6. In case if you wanted to install a specific older version, then you can scroll down. You should be able to review the details here. In this case, I would like to install Python 3.8. Let me search for Python 3.8 here. Under Python 3.8, the latest version is nothing but 3.8.13. I'm actually looking for that version. You can see Python 3.8.13 here. Now you should be able to click on this. You can go to the page related to Python 3.8.13. Now you should be able to scroll down. You can see the Python 3.8 version gzipped source tarball and also compressed source tarball. I don't want to use those. There should be a better way to install this. We should be able to hit back arrow here and go here. Instead of clicking on this, if you click on download, it might download the Python 3.8.13 for you. Even here, it is not actually showing. Let's go to the message here. According to the release calendar specified in PEP 569, Python 3.8 is now in the security fixes only stage of its life cycle. 3.8 branch only accepts security fixes and releases of those are made irregularly in source only form blah blah blah. Python 3.8.10 was the last full bug fix release of Python 3.8 with binary installers. So when it comes to Python 3.8.13, there's no binary installer. I would like to use binary installer for the purpose of learning DBT. And hence, instead of attempting to install Python 3.8.13 using the compressed tarball, let's go back here. As part of specific releases, let's scroll down further and let's look out for Python 3.8.10. You can see Python 3.8.10 here. Let's click on this. Now let's scroll down. We should be able to see the binary installer here. Windows users, the binaries for blah blah blah. I don't see the installer here. Yeah, we can see the installers here. In this case, we are using Windows 64-bit and hence we have to use it. Most likely your system also will be Windows 64-bit only, and hence it should work. If you are not sure whether your system is Windows 64 or not, all you need to do is you can go to the File Explorer and then right click on this PC, then click on Properties. Then you should be able to see the system type here. It should be 64-bit operating system. Most likely yours should be 64-bit only because 32-bit is outdated long time back. Now let's click on this one. Let's double click on this so that Python 3.8.10 is installed successfully on this machine. You can click on install now. It will take care of installing Python 3.8.10. Even if you are using Mac, you can follow similar instructions. However, instead of installing using Windows installer, you have to choose appropriate macOS installer based upon your current situation. Either you can choose this one or this one and then take it further. You can also look for the description to understand which link you should be using to install Python 3.8. Now, when it comes to this Windows, Python 3.8.10 is successfully installed. We can click on close. Once we click on close, let's see whether it will actually show any window which actually talk about launching Python. It is not. You should be able to go to the search bar and then search for Python to confirm whether Python is set up successfully or not. You can see Python 3.8 here. You should be able to click on this. You can see the window with Python 3.8 64-bit. You can actually exit from here. Now you can actually launch PowerShell. PowerShell is a bit advanced CLI. You should be able to not only launch Python using PowerShell, you can perform other type of tasks on your Windows machine. Typically, we use PowerShell or flavor of PowerShell to actually interact with applications using command line interface. Let me launch PowerShell here. Once PowerShell is launched, we should be able to try by saying Python 3 and hit enter. Even though Python 3.8 is installed, it is not getting recognized. It is actually asking us to set up Python 3.10. Let's close this. Let's try Python 3.8. It is saying Python 3.8 is not recognized as a command. Let's exit from here. We need to make sure environment variable is set. Then we have to take it further. The environment variable which is supposed to be set or updated is nothing but path. We need to make sure we specify the path of the Python as part of the environment variable called as path. You can actually search for environment variables using search bar. You can click on edit the system environment variables here. Typically it will pop up here, but it haven't, but you can see it is launched here. You can click on this. Now you have to click on environment variables here. Then you have to click on path, then edit. Then you can click on browse and you have to specify the path of the Python. Let's check the path of the Python by going to the search bar again. Here you can right click. Then you can actually click on open file location. The file location is nothing but this one. It is under ITversity, app data, roaming, Microsoft Windows, start menu, programs, blah, blah, blah. This should be a shortcut. Let me right click on it. Let me click on properties. The target is nothing but this one. This is how you should be able to identify the original file and take it further. Under my home directory, users ITversity, there is a folder called as app data. Under app data, there is a folder called as local. Then it have programs. Then it have Python. Then it have Python 3.8. Then it have python.exe. All we need to do is we have to copy the parent folder of python.exe that is shown in the target. Let's copy this. Once it is copied, you can go here and then you should be able to paste directly. Let me cancel it. Let me click on new. Let me paste. This is how you should be able to specify the folder in which we have Python executables so that Python can be launched from anywhere. In case if you are not comfortable in copying and pasting the path, you can also click on browse and follow the folder structure. The way you can follow is like this. After clicking on browse, you have to go to the home directory. In my case, my home directory is nothing but ITversity, which is also there on top of my desktop. If you don't see your home folder directly, to make sure you actually get into your home folder, you can expand this PC. Then you can go to C drive, then users, then the folder which is named after the user using which you have logged in. In my case, it is nothing but ITversity. Under ITversity, app data, then local, then you should see Python here. Let me see whether we have Python or not. There is no Python, but under local, probably I might have to go to programs. Now we can see the Python. It is already Python 3.8. It have automatically expanded Python 3.8. You can select this, then you can click on OK. This is how you should be able to specify path here as part of the path environment variable to make sure the folder which contains Python executables is added. Now we can click on OK, then click on OK, then click on OK here. Let me click on OK as well. Let me close this folder. Let me also close the browser here. Now let me launch PowerShell. Let me type Python here and hit enter. You can see that Python CLI is launched using Python 3.8.10. As we are ready with Python on top of Visual Studio Code, it is time for us to take it further and start going to the details about setting up DBT CLI so that we can learn DBT CLI with hands-on tasks. Let's go to the details about setting up the workspace using Visual Studio Code with Python 3.8.10. Then we'll take it further. As we have Visual Studio Code with Python extension on our Mac or Windows, now we should be able to set up relevant environment and then we can take it further. Let me close this here. Let me go here. Let me click on open folder. I'll be setting up the folder like this under my home folder, which is nothing but ITversity. This is the home folder. If you're not sure about whether you're in a home folder or not, the way you can go to home folder is like this. You can click on this PC, then C drive, then users, then there'll be a folder based on the user using which you have logged in into this Windows based machine. In this case, I have logged in using ITversity, and hence you can see a folder by name ITversity here. If you get into this folder, that means you are in home folder on your Windows machine. Now in this, I'll be setting up a folder called as projects. I typically follow this structure. It is already there. Let me go into the projects. Now I should be able to create a new folder. Let me say new, then folder. Let me give the name as internal. Now let me say new, then folder, bootcamp. Now ITversity material. In this ITversity material folder, I'll be having one more folder. The folder name is nothing but mastering DBT. Again, in this folder, I'll be having DBT-GS or DBT demo. Whatever name you want to give, you can give. Let me say DBT-GS. GS stands for getting started. Now let me click on select folder. We need to make sure this is selected, and then we need to make sure this button is clicked. Now your VS Code is set up using DBT-GS as the workspace. You can create required files here. In this workspace, I would like to create Python virtual environment. Then I would like to take it further. Once you are here, you can actually launch a command prompt by clicking on terminal and then by choosing new terminal. You can see that the terminal is launched using Windows PowerShell. Already we have used Windows PowerShell directly. It is the same PowerShell, however, it is integral part of VS Code here. Also keep in mind that we are already in the project workspace directory. If you look at the path of this directory, it is the actual directory in which workspace is set up. Now let's make sure we can launch Python here. However, it is not able to launch the Python. Let me make sure I close and reopen again. Let me launch VS Code here. Now let me go to the terminal once again. Still VS Code is coming up. We need to wait until VS Code come up. Now it have come up. You can see that it have even launched the PowerShell. Now let's type Python once again and hit enter. You can see that Python CLI is launched. This time the Python command is recognized using Python 3.8.10. Earlier it haven't worked because I have installed Python 3.8 on this Windows machine once VS Code is launched. Before VS Code is launched earlier to set up the workspace, Python 3.8 was not installed. As Python 3.8 is installed after launching VS Code, when I have launched the terminal earlier or PowerShell using terminal earlier, it is not able to recognize Python. After restarting the VS Code after installing Python, it is able to recognize Python command using Python 3.8 version. That being said, using this, we should be able to set up something called as Python virtual environment, in which we should be able to install DBT using pip command. Let's set up the Python virtual environment and also activate in this VS Code window. Then we'll actually take it further to install required packages using pip. The way you can create Python virtual environment is like this. You can say Python, then -m, then venv. In this case, I'll be naming my virtual environment as dg-venv. DG stands for DBT GS. GS stands for getting started. I'm just giving name with some context so that I know which Python virtual environment is activated, because I'll be using quite a few Python virtual environments supporting multiple projects. Now let me hit enter. It will take care of setting up the Python virtual environment for us. It is taking a bit of time. Now it is set up. Let me exit from here. At this time, we have VS Code set up. Also, we have Python 3.8. Using Python 3.8, we have even set up Python virtual environment. We need to make sure the Python virtual environment which is created is activated in this VS Code. The way you can activate is like this. First, you can create a program file. Let me right click here in the open space and then let me click on new file. Make sure the file is created directly in the workspace, not in the virtual environment. I'll be giving the name as hw.py. hw stands for hello world. Now let me say print hello world. Let me save it. As soon as you save it, it will automatically choose appropriate Python virtual environment, identifying this as Python project. You can confirm by looking at this in the bottom right corner. You can see it have chosen the Python virtual environment which we have just set up, which is nothing but dg-venv. Now you can also launch PowerShell or terminal, which is nothing but PowerShell. You can see that it have activated the Python virtual environment even here. Now using this, you should be able to set up DBT, and then using the DBT that is being set up here, you should be able to learn quite a few details with respect to DBT hands-on. As we have successfully set up Project Workspace to learn DBT using DBT CLI, let's go ahead and set up DBT CLI. First, let me review the documentation, then I'll take it further. Before going further, let me collapse this and also let me maximize CLI, because I'll be using CLI itself to set up DBT CLI. The CLI which I'm going to use is nothing but Windows PowerShell CLI. As we have launched terminal using VS Code, it have launched PowerShell, which is nothing but CLI on Windows. Now let me click on browser here. Let me search for DBT, or we can directly go to getdbt.com. Let me say getdbt.com here. It will take us to the official page of getdbt. GetDBT is the platform which actually provide required support to open source DBT. Now you can go to the documentation here, then click on docs homepage. You see there is DBT CLI. If you go to installing DBT from the command line, there are quite a few options. You have something called as use pip to install DBT. We are using pip here. You can scroll down and you can get all the details with respect to installing DBT using pip. Now when it comes to DBT, we have core, and then there are additional packages based upon the database against which you wanted to use DBT to develop your transformation logic. The DBT packages which are mapped to respective databases are called as adapters. DBT core is DBT main package, and then you have packages based on the adapters. Adapters are named after the databases against which those adapters can be used. You can see an example here. As part of pip install, you have dbt-core, then you have dbt-postgres, then Redshift, then Snowflake, then BigQuery. These are nothing but adapters. This is nothing but core. Even if you skip dbt-core and if you just install adapter, it will take care of installing core, and then it will take care of installing the adapter. For now, I'll just use pip install dbt-core to install dbt core in this environment. I should be able to go to the PowerShell which is opened as part of VS Code. Now I should be able to say pip install dbt-core. It will take care of installing dbt core on this machine in the virtual environment related to this project called as dbt-gs. Now you can see that dbt core is being installed. Once dbt core is installed, we should be able to install relevant adapter. For now, I'll be installing dbt-postgres as part of relevant modules in relevant courses. I'll be installing other adapters as well. It is taking a bit of time to install dbt core. Let's wait until dbt core is completely installed, then we'll take it further. Now you can see that dbt core is installed. Along with dbt core, quite a few other Python modules are installed. You should be able to list all the modules that are installed with that single command by saying pip list. You can see there are quite a few modules installed when we say pip install dbt core. On top of this, I would like to install dbt postgres also. Let me say pip install dbt-postgres. It will take care of installing Postgres adapter. In the similar manner, depending upon the database against which you want to use dbt, you should be able to set up additional libraries as well. These are called as the adapters. Even the adapter for Postgres is set up successfully. Now we should be able to validate whether DBT CLI is accessible or not. For that, you can say dbt-h. It will show the usage of dbt command. There are quite a few subcommands under dbt. It will list all the subcommands here. One of the command which you can use quickly is nothing but -- version. It will actually give us the version of dbt that is set up. The command will be like this: dbt space -- version, hit enter. The version of dbt that is set up on this Windows machine is nothing but 1.2.0. Even on Mac, you can follow the instructions in the similar manner using VS Code. You will see similar experience. There might be some differences with respect to the paths. Other than that, everything rest should be same between Windows versus Mac. The reason why the interface will be similar is because we are actually using VS Code on top of Windows or Mac, not the actual terminals of Windows or Mac. That being said, as dbt core and dbt postgres are set up, as dbt CLI can be used. Let's understand dbt CLI a little bit, and then we'll actually initiate a project and then we'll take it further. As we are ready with dbt CLI along with dbt postgres adapter, let's make sure we initialize a new dbt project. We should be able to use command called as init to initialize a new dbt project. Once we run init command, then we'll actually go to the other details so that we are comfortable using dbt CLI without too many challenges. The way you can actually use dbt init command is like this. You can say dbt, then init, then hit enter. You see, it is asking for us to give a name for the project. Let me give the name as retail_pg. That is the project name. PG stands for Postgres. Retail is the database which we are going to use, or retail is the use case which we are going to use to learn DBT. Let me hit enter. Now let's go to the details here. It is asking a question, which database would you like to use, and it have listed databases here. As of now, there is only one database. It is nothing but Postgres. The reason why we are seeing only one is because we have installed only one adapter. If you have installed more adapters, you should have seen more databases here based on the adapters that are installed at this juncture. It is asking to enter a number. Let me enter the number as 1 here. Now let me hit enter. You can see that it is executed successfully. Now, as we are using Windows, we should be able to use command called as dir. If you are using Mac, you can use ls command. On Mac or Ubuntu, I would recommend you to use ls-ltr command rather than just ls. Whether you use dir on Windows or ls-ltr on Mac or Ubuntu, you should be able to see the folder by name retail_pg because we have initiated the project with this name. On top of this folder, you will also be seeing additional folder called as logs. That being said, now let's come out of the terminal. We will not be using terminal very often. Only when we want to use some DBT commands using command line, we'll use terminal. Otherwise, we'll be using IDE features only. Now I have exited from the terminal, aka PowerShell. Now I should be able to click on this to look at the folder structure. You can see there's a folder by name retail_pg and also logs. You can click on retail_pg. You can see there are quite a few subfolders here. On top of subfolders, there are 3 files as well. One is .gitignore. Second one is dbt_project.yml. The third one is read_md. The important file is nothing but dbt_project.yml because it is related to DBT. Even these folders are very important. The most important one is nothing but models. As developers, we should be very comfortable about models. Eventually, we will pick some advanced concepts also, such as tests and all. But for now, to get started, models is the most important one. If you look at models, there is a subfolder called as example. As part of example folder, again, we have 3 files. The 3 files are nothing but my first dbt model.sql, my second dbt model.sql, schema.yml. We'll review the files and we'll try to understand what they actually mean as part of subsequent lectures in this sectional module. In this lecture, we have primarily taken care of initiating a new project by name retail_pg using DBT CLI. Now we need to make sure we update the profile so that it can be connected to Postgres database. However, for that, we need to have Postgres database. Let me walk you through the details about how to set up Postgres database so that we can configure our project to work with that Postgres database. I'll be covering those details as part of next lecture. Yeah, we are ready with the development environment on Windows or Mac. Now it is time for us to have database. Without database, you will not be able to build applications using DBT. There are multiple ways where you can set up database, especially Postgres, to get started with DBT. You can use Docker and set up Postgres using Docker and take it further. You can also install Postgres locally and take it further. However, instead of using either of the approaches, I'll use something called as ElephantSQL. Let me go to the details about how to set up Postgres database using ElephantSQL. ElephantSQL is nothing but a cloud-based Postgres service. It will simplify our process of setting up Postgres database to learn DBT. Now I should be able to go to the browser. Then I can say ElephantSQL.com. Now we are in the homepage of the ElephantSQL.com. You can click on login. You can see login page here. In case if you wanted to sign up, you have to click on sign up. You have to follow the instructions and you have to complete the sign up. Once the sign up is done, then you should be able to log in into ElephantSQL using your email ID and password, or you can also use Gmail or GitHub if you have signed up using Gmail or GitHub. Earlier I have signed up using Google and hence I'll be logging in using Google itself. Now let me click on sign in with Google. Let me pick relevant email ID, which is nothing but this one. You can see that we are in the instances dashboard. As of now, there are no instances. We should be able to click on create new instance. We can give the name for this. Let me name it as retail. The plan is nothing but Tiny Turtle, which is for free. There are also other plans such as Simple Spider, Crazy Cat, Pretty Panda, so on and so forth. You can choose the plan based upon your preference. In this case, I'll be choosing Tiny Turtle, which is for free. Now we should be able to click on select region. Let me click on review. Now let's click on create instance. Now the Postgres instance is ready. You can click on the instance name here. You can see the details about this Postgres instance. This is the server name. This is the region. Region is not important for us. However, user and default database names are important. Also password. Using server, then user as well as database, and then password along with a port which is nothing but 5432 by default. We should be able to connect any client to this database that is set up using ElephantSQL. Let's go to the details about how to configure DBT CLI to actually work with this database when it comes to Postgres related projects. As of now, we are ready with the Postgres instance using ElephantSQL, and also we are ready with the project using Visual Studio Code. Now we need to make sure these two are integrated. One of the ways to integrate DBT project with any database like Postgres is updating the profile. As part of the profile, you need to make sure all the information related to connecting to the database are added. When it comes to connecting to Postgres database, we need host, port, database, username and password. If you go to ElephantSQL web console, you can actually get the host name here. Port is nothing but 5432 by default. You don't need to worry too much about reviewing port here because we are using Postgres. The default port is nothing but 5432. This is the username as well as the database name. You can see the password here. We can use these details to configure the DBT to connect to the Postgres database. Now, the way you have to configure DBT is by updating the profile. Let me connect to the Windows machine where I have set up the project. Let me launch Visual Studio Code here. We have set up the DBT project using Visual Studio Code. Let me get into the Visual Studio Code here. We have already ran DBT init and we have created this project. This project is based on Postgres adapter. When we initiate the project using DBT init command, it will update details about connecting to the database using something called as profile. Where is the file related to the profile? The file will be under hidden folder called as .dbt within home directory of the user that is used to log in into the system. If it is Windows, it is nothing but C:// then users, then there will be a folder by name whatever user we have used to log in. In my case, I have logged in as ITversity. This is considered as a home folder. Under this home folder, there will be a hidden folder called as .dbt. In that, you will find YAML file or file with YML extension where the details about connecting to the database are persisted. In this case, even though the profile file will be there will be placeholders to connect to the Postgres database because it haven't prompted us to enter those details. Now we should be able to open that profiles.yaml file by using VS Code itself. All we need to do is we go to file, then we say open file. Once we click on open file, then we have to go to home directory. The home directory can be accessed starting from this PC, then C drive, then users, then the folder which is named after the user that is used to log in. In this case, it is nothing but ITversity. In this, you can see .dbt. Even on Mac, you should be able to find this folder. However, when it comes to the Mac, you might not be able to see hidden folders directly when you try to open using VS Code. You have to use appropriate shortcut. I think it is nothing but Command-Shift dot. It will show all the hidden folders in the home folder. When it comes to the Mac, the home folder is nothing but / users, then /, then the folder name which is named after the user using which you have logged in. And then you should be able to see a hidden folder like this. You can take it further. You just have to hit Command, Shift and dot to actually list all the hidden folders when you try to open on Mac. Now let me get into .dbt. Let me double click on profiles.yaml. Now let me actually click on open here. Now you can see profiles.yaml is opened. Depending upon the projects you have set up using DBT as part of your environment, you'll be seeing quite a few like this. In this case, as we have set up only retail_pg, we can see only one entry under retail_pg. This is the main one. Underneath that, you have outputs and you have target. Within outputs, we have dev and prod. Depending upon your preference, you can update whatever you wanted to update. I'll be updating dev. When it comes to type, it is nothing but Postgres because we are trying to connect to Postgres database in this project. When it comes to threads, as our database is lightweight database, let me set it to 1. Don't set it to high value. If you set it to high value, you might run into maximum connections issues because we are using free tier of Postgres. Now let me save this. Then when it comes to the host, we need to go to the ElephantSQL interface. This is the host. Let me copy this. Make sure you copy only up to .com. Now you can go here. You should be able to replace this with that host name. When it comes to the port, it is nothing but 5432. Let me set 5432 explicitly. When it comes to username and DB name, it is same. The username and DB name is nothing but this one. Let me make sure this is replaced with that username. When it comes to the password, it is nothing but this one. Let me click on this to copy. This is nothing but clipboard icon. If you click on it, the password will be copied into it. Now let me go here. Let me replace this. Now when it comes to the DB name, it is same as the username. Let me copy the username from here and then update the DB name. When it comes to schema, you can specify the schema which is relevant for your project. Let me name it as public. Now let me save it. In case if you specify the schema which doesn't exist, as long as you use appropriate user with right permissions, it will be able to create the schema. If you use users which are not admins, if the schema doesn't exist, it will fail. In this case, if you are trying to configure DBT project with the Postgres database provided to you by your IT team as part of your work location, then you might not have super admin permissions at that time. If you specify schema that doesn't exist, or if you specify the schema which exists but if the user doesn't have permissions, you will run into issues. You need to keep these details in mind. That being said, as I'm using Postgres database which is set up using ElephantSQL, as I have all the permissions to control all the databases in this Postgres instance, as I'm using the user which have those permissions, everything should work without any issues. Even if we specify the schema which doesn't exist, it will be created automatically and it will take care of adding the objects based upon the applications we build using DBT. Now let me save it. We are done with the updating the database connectivity details as part of profile. As we are done with it, now it is time for us to validate. Let's go to the details about validation as part of the next lecture. As we have configured the profile of DBT project to connect to Postgres database, now let's see whether we'll be able to validate the connectivity or not. When we actually initiate any DBT project, you'll find models under models folder. You can expand models folder. You can see there is something called as example. As part of example folder, you can see there are 2 SQL scripts. These 2 SQL scripts have relevant SQL logic. Keep in mind that these SQL scripts might not contain the foolproof SQL which can be copied and pasted into database and run. There will be code in it. These are nothing but templates. Based upon the requirements we build these templates. These templates will be compiled into queries at runtime, and then those queries will be executed against the database. We need to make sure we have relevant folder under models. The folder should contain the SQL scripts using which we can validate our project. As of now, you can see there are 2 SQL scripts. In this case, it is saying config materialized equal to table. It means it will try to create a table using the name of the SQL script. In this case, the name of the SQL script is nothing but my first DBT model. In case if this runs successfully, then as part of Postgres database in public schema, you will find a table by name my first DBT model. Why table? Because at the beginning of this SQL script, you have something like this. This is called as Jinja templating. As part of this macro, which is part of Jinja templating, you have something called as config. As part of config, you have materialized equal to table. The other valid values with respect to materialized are nothing but view, incremental, etc. Depending upon what you want to do with the results of this query, you can configure like this. In this case, it will create a table by name my first DBT model. That table will contain the results of this query. Now, if you review the second script, you can see it is saying select star from, then it is saying ref of my first DBT model as part of the Jinja macro. When it comes to my first DBT model, there is a SQL script by this name, which is nothing but this one. Whatever is generated by this, whether it is a view or a table, the table name or view name will be replaced at the runtime, and then the query will be built for us. As we do not have macro materialized here, when I say macro materialized, I am talking about config with materialized. It is by default view. If you wanted to create a table out of these results, then you have to use config of materialized equal to table, the way we have seen as part of this one. As we do not have this entry in the second script, it will be considered as view, which means as part of public schema in the Postgres database, there will be a view by name my second DBT model. The view will be based on the query. When it comes to the views will not be executed immediately. It will just build the view. You should be able to use view while you want to further process the data based on the view, either by using a BI tool or downstream ETL process. That being said, in this case, if we run this project, there will be a table in public schema by name my first DBT model and also view by name my second DBT model. Let's see whether we'll be able to run this successfully or not. To run this, you can actually launch the terminal. In this case, it is better for you to launch the terminal in the project itself. When I say in the project, I am talking about DBT project. The project folder for the DBT project is nothing but retail_pg, and hence we should be able to right click on it, then say open in integrated terminal. The terminal will be automatically opened in that folder. Also, you can see that the virtual environment is automatically activated. Now we should be able to say dbt run, then -- models, then example. It will take care of running the model. However, It is optional to specify this if you have configured appropriately in dbt_project.yml. Let me click on this dbt_project.yml. If you look at the properties here, you have something called as model paths. As part of the model paths, we have specified the folder called as models, which means whatever you have in the models folder will be considered as models. There should be one folder for each group of models. In this case, example is one group of models. Now, if you scroll down, you see here under models, you have the project name and then example, which means it is actually configured to run this when we run this project. We don't need to specify models explicitly. If you have like this, whatever you have specified here will be automatically run for us. In this case, it is configured as plus materialized view. When we run this, if you look at the script here, it doesn't have the macro whether to use view or table, as we have specified view as part of dbt_project.yml. When it comes to this example model using plus materialized, it will end up creating view for this. Now let's run this command and see whether the project will be executed successfully or not. Let me hit enter. It will take a bit of time to actually run this. Let's wait until it is run. Then we'll actually review the details. Now it is running. We'll go through all the details once it is run. First of all, let's review the details here. You can see that it is saying done. Everything is passed. Also, you can see the message here. It is saying completed successfully. Now, if you read all the log messages from the beginning, it says running with DBT equal to 1.2.0. This project is set up using DBT version 1.2.0. And then it is saying partial pass save file not found. You can ignore this. This is not relevant at this juncture. As part of example, we have two models because there are two SQL scripts. That's why it is saying found two models. It is also saying 4 tests. That is because on top of models, we also have tests folder. I haven't gone to the details about tests yet, and hence for now you can ignore. You can ignore rest of the details. The main thing is nothing but models here. You can see it is saying 2 models because we have 2 SQL scripts here. Now you can see the models have ran in sequence. DBT is able to determine the dependencies internally. You can see that there is a reference to my first DBT model as part of my second DBT model. Based on this dependency, it actually ran my first DBT model first, and then it attempted to run my second DBT model. You can see the details here. This is how the DBT project have ran for us. As we are able to run the DBT project with the 2 models, we are expecting to see a table and a view as part of public schema in the database. We'll go to the details about validating those details in the next lecture. So far, we have just ran the project and we have reviewed the details whether the project is successfully run or not. However, we haven't verified the table and view which are supposed to be created. We'll go to those details in the next lecture. As we are able to run the project successfully, let's review the details whether the view and table are created in the public schema in the Postgres database or not. In this case, I'll be using ElephantSQL UI itself to validate whether the table and view are created or not. Let me go to my browser. As part of the browser, I am already in the ElephantSQL website, especially in the database which I have created earlier. Once you are in the page which is associated with your database, you should be able to see something called as browser. You can click on browser here. Once you click on browser, you should be able to see the IDE related to Postgres database here. You should be able to develop queries using this simple IDE. It doesn't have too many good features, but you don't need to worry too much about setting up client to validate whether view and table are created or not. You should be able to use this simple IDE or UI to validate details about tables and views that are created in the database which is set up using this interface. Make sure you are actually connected to the relevant database instance using which the DBT project is configured. In this case, I have only one DB instance and hence I should be able to use it safely. I don't need to worry too much about whether I am connected to appropriate DB instance or not. Now I should be able to say select star from, then the table name will be my underscore. Let me check the model name here. The model name is nothing but my first DBT model, and hence the table will be created using that name. In this case, I just have to say my first DBT model. Now I should be able to click on execute to see whether I'll be able to query this table or not. You can see that I'm able to query the table. Let me also validate by querying the view which is created because of the second model. I should be able to say select star from my underscore second underscore dbt underscore model, because that is the name of the model in which we are supposed to create view for the query that is generated based on the script in the model. Let me execute. You can see that it have ran successfully. To confirm whether it is of type view and also this is of type table, we should be able to query something called as information underscore schema dot tables. So let me say select star from information underscore schema dot tables, where let me say schema equal to public, and then let me say and table underscore name like my percentage. Let me add semicolon at the end. Now let me select this. Let me click on execute. Let's see whether it will return results or not. Here we have to say table underscore schema. Let me say table underscore schema. Now let me select this. Let me click on execute once again. Now you can see the details about both the entities. One of the entity is nothing but my first DBT model. If you check the type, it is nothing but base table. The other entity is nothing but my second DBT model. It is of type view. This is how you should be able to validate what is going on internally whenever we run DBT projects. In the previous lecture, we have taken care of running the project, and also we have validated whether the project is run successfully or not by reviewing the logs. In this lecture, we have gone to the details about validating the tables and views that are created because of running the project. As part of this sectional module, we have gone to the details about setting up DBT project using Postgres as a database using CLI. In that process, we have learned how to set up DBT CLI using pip. For that, we have actually set up project using VS Code, and then we have created Python virtual environment. Once the Python virtual environment is ready, then we have set up DBT core and also DBT Postgres to set up DBT CLI. Using the DBT CLI, we have even initialized the project. We have used Postgres as the adapter for that project. Once the project is created, we have gone to the details about the models in the project, and also we have ran the project. Once we run the project, we have gone to the details to validate whether the project is run successfully. The details that are covered are nothing but logs and also tables and views that are created because of the models that are there as part of the project. There are quite a few other concepts also with respect to DBT. I'll not be going to those details at this juncture in the sectional module. In the next section or module, I'll primarily focus on DBT Cloud, which is also very good platform. Once we go to the details using DBT Cloud, then we'll actually go to the rest of the concepts that are important to build applications using DBT. As we have started successfully using DBT CLI. Now let's explore how to get started with DBT Cloud. Then we'll take it further.